Have you ever felt like a complete outsider? Well, today we're jumping into a sermon that unpacks one of history's deepest divides, a massive wall of separation described by the Apostle Paul, and more importantly, the one thing powerful enough to completely tear it down.
Okay, so this is where the sermon we're exploring really kicks off. This quote, it paints a seriously bleak picture for anyone outside the early Jewish faith, the people they called Gentiles. Just try to imagine that for a second. Being totally cut off, described as being without hope and literally without God. This wasn't just a feeling, it was seen as a spiritual reality.
And the pastor makes a really important point here. This isn't some dusty old history lesson. Paul's message is an urgent command, a plea to remember. Remember what it was like on the other side of that chasm. It's this powerful call to never forget the before so you can truly deeply appreciate the after.
So, just how deep was this divide really? Well, the sermon breaks it down for us into 5 specific points of separation. Think of them as 5 layers of a wall that seemed absolutely impenetrable between the Gentiles and God's people.
This list right here, it just lays out how total that exclusion really was. We're not talking about small cultural differences. This was a complete and total lack of spiritual standing across 5 absolutely critical areas. So let's walk through them one by one.
First up, no citizenship. They were outsiders to what was called the Commonwealth of Israel. The pastor explains it like this. Imagine being a foreigner in a country where you have 0 rights. You can't claim any of the benefits that citizens get, no protection, no provision, no sense of belonging. Nothing.
Second, they were completely excluded from the specific covenants, the sacred binding agreements that God made with his people. We're talking about the foundational deals God made with figures like Abraham, Moses, and David. Gentiles had no part in them. They were total strangers to these core defining relationships.
And you can see how this snowballs, right? Because they were outside the covenants, they were also without the promises. All those specific things God promised to Israel, blessings, land, protection, a future Messiah, none of it applied to them. They had no divine promise they could hold on to.
And this leads directly to the 4th point, which is just devastating, being without hope. Now, the pastor makes a key distinction here. Biblical hope isn't just wishful thinking, like, I hope it doesn't rain. It's a confident, solid expectation that's rooted in a promise. So if you don't have access to God's promises, you literally have no foundation for real, tangible hope.
And all of this, it all builds up to this 5th and honestly most profound state, being without God. And to be specific, this meant having no relationship with Yahweh, the personal name for the God of Israel. It was the ultimate spiritual isolation, a complete and total separation from the source of all life and hope.
Okay, so to really, truly grasp how deep this divide went, the pastor shows us the pretty harsh perspective that the Jewish people of that time had towards non-Jews. And this wasn't just, a political thing. It was deeply, deeply theological.
And wow, the language used to describe Gentiles, it really drives this point home. These weren't just casual insults. Terms like dogs, sinners, and uncircumcised were loaded with theological meaning. Each one reinforced this idea that Gentiles were spiritually unclean and fundamentally outside of God's favor.
So, after building up this deep, seemingly permanent divide, this massive wall, the entire narrative just pivots. Paul spends all this time establishing this separation, and then he reveals the one thing, the only thing, powerful enough to bring it all crashing down.
The question then is just hanging in the air, right? How could a chasm that vast and that ancient ever be bridged? I mean, what could possibly happen to reverse a spiritual reality that seems so absolutely permanent?
And here it is. The entire story, the whole narrative, pivots on these 4 simple words, but now in Christ Jesus. According to the sermon, this isn't just a simple transition, it's a cosmic shift. The arrival of Jesus didn't just tweak the rules, it completely changed the entire spiritual landscape.
So this is the absolute game changer. The pastor explains that this single act, Christ's sacrifice, it just erased the distance. It created a brand new path to God, one that made access available to everyone, regardless of their background, not just one specific group of people.
This transformation, it created a completely new reality, bringing outsiders into the very heart of the family. But, and this is a big but, according to the pastor, this incredible gift of inclusion comes with a very, very critical warning.
I mean, just look at this reversal. It's absolutely stunning. Every single point of exclusion we talked about is now flipped on its head and becomes a point of inclusion. The citizenship, the covenants, the promises, the hope, and God himself, it's all available now through faith. What was once a locked, barred gate is now thrown wide open.
But here's the catch. The pastor really highlights Paul's warning to these newly included Gentiles, do not become arrogant. He reminds them that their new position is a gift, not a right. He says, look, if God was willing to cut off the natural branches, his own chosen people Israel, because of their unbelief, he could just as easily cut you off if you become prideful.
And this brings us right to the sermon's final, crucial point, remembering that before state, it isn't about shame. It's about cultivating this deep, profound sense of humility and gratitude. It's the recognition that this inclusion is a gift, not an achievement, that changes everything. And it leaves us with a real challenge. It's not just about what we believe, but do we truly remember what it means to have been brought from so far away to so very near?